Welcome everyone to the Upriver Crawfish. I'm your host Sankara. Today is July 2nd, 2022, and bringing you the update, the SitRep on the special military operations in Ukraine. All right. Today I will be going to another map, but I will start off here giving you guys orientation. So again, this is Ukraine. This is Ukraine. This is the area of the conflicts right now where Russia is in. Down here is Crimea. So Russia has all of these positions. I've taken over all these areas in pink. Uh, this area is where Russia did the feint at the beginning of the conflict, where they did a feint into Kiev area and Chernigov and Sumy. And this year is Kharkov area. This year is the Donbass. This is the area where most of the fighting is. There are some activities along here, which is Kherson and Zaporozhye, but most of the activities is around here. I want to focus on this area right now. I will come back and talk about Kharkov a little bit, and then we'll also address the situation on Sminy Island or Snake Island, and then talk about some stuff from NATO, some comments NATO made about increasing their quick reaction force to 300,000 men, and then again go into Kharkov and talk about the Kraken and Nazi battalions. Okay, so let's begin with another map. Okay, so right now we're talking about the area of Lysichansk. That's the area where most of the fighting is in. Uh, Before I got on, I saw a report that Lysichansk was fully liberated. Uh, but prior to hearing that Lysichansk was fully operated and fully liberated, this was what was going on. So remember earlier, the Russians have blocked the main route leading out of. They have blocked the route leading out of Lysichansk for the main transport route out of Lysichansk that was coming and from Lysichansk to Siversk. They have blocked that route. So the Ukrainians, when there was reports that they were going to move back in this direction, come to Belokorovka, cross the Siversky Donetsk River, and then come over to Siversk, and that's how they were going to pull out. So apparently that's what they did, and some of the forces were able to get out. But that would mean that a lot of the heavy weapons were not taken. Maybe they took some tanks that they got to ride on and stuff and get out. But I doubt that the Russians sat there and let them cross the Seversky Donetsk River and Belogorovka with artillery and stuff like that. Assuming they even had those there still. But what the Russian just couple of days ago, I mean, this one has gone fast. Just a couple of days ago, the Russians have been right in this area. They have been right here, and below they had not even taken the when the week began, they had not even taken the oil refinery yet. So they were somewhere around here with Volcherovska, and they had just taken Belayagora or Belagora. They are taking this area, but now they pushed. What they did was they made movements in several different directions. One, they pushed over towards Spian, and they're developing an assault on Siversk because the guys leaving here are running to Siversk, and eventually I think they will run over down to Slavyansk and Kramatorsk to prepare for the battle there. But what the Russians wanted to do was to cut them off here, but and those guys were running so fast that I think the Russians did not get time to do it. So they launched these several assaults on Lysichansk. They moved from the northwest, coming over here to Novodruzhsk, and then trying to close out Belgorovka because they knew that's where those guys were trying to go through the farmlands or through the lowlands and cross over the Seversky and Donetsk River. This is the Seversky Donetsk River. So right now, if it is true that the whole of Lysichansk has been liberated, that means the Ukrainian forces were fast enough to run out of there. A good way to do withdrawal is usually to do what you call a retrograde operations. So the units on the front will hold their positions, and then other units will go behind and establish new defensive position. Because you're doing a mobile defense, you establish another defensive position behind them, and then allow those guys now to pull back. Those guys will go, so it's leapfrogging backward. Those guys will go and make other positions behind the guys who made the first position, the first withdrawal position. And these guys, when the forces, attacking forces come, they meet them, they battle with them a little bit, while those guys set up another defensive position and they keep walking it back. So keep walking it back till you get out. But the situation was made grave by the fact that this road, this last road was taken. First, it was under, when the Russians were here, it was under, I would call what you would call an operational encirclement, because they have fire control on that road. But now they went, within a week, they were able to seize the oil refinery, the Lysichansk oil refinery, and then seize that. And it wasn't too long before they actually seized the road, so no one can go through there anymore. And then they moved to cut. They moved from the north, took in Shipolovka. That was just taken about a day or two ago. And then all of a sudden they were already pushing off here. So that means the Ukrainians pulled back faster than they pretty much they were in a Russian panic. And that makes sense because the position they put themselves in. So this blue line showed where they're going, and then the Russians were trying to cut them off, but they ran faster than the Russians could cut them off. So that's what it is now. We'll see if they report true that Lysichansk has been fully liberated. I think it's possible because those guys ran. They had 8,000 men there, and this time they were smart enough to decide, let's get our butt out of there. So they went running and got out of there. So there were about 2,000 men as of yesterday. There were supposed to be some 2,000 men still in the cauldron before this part closed. But it's possible that they ran out and through Belgorovka and came through here. So these guys were trying to cut them off and by going to the city of Seversk. But my bet is if they're smart and you get to the city of Seversk, I would say move out of that area and go to a better position to prepare. But so that's what's happened in the Lysichansk area. So pretty much it is almost taking over. If anything, that the Russians may be taking the time to clear it. There's videos from last week that showed some battle in the streets. If you notice what the Russians did, they had the BTR 82 and BTR 82A firing while troops were in the back making movements in the back. And classic, that's a classic, how you call it, urban warfare stuff. So those tanks and armor personnel were laying fire downrange while the guys were maneuvering in the back, and then they would go and close with the Ukrainian and then destroy them if they were there. Whereas the tanks and armor personnel carriers were taking a macro positions on their approaches and fire in, because in city warfare, tanks become vulnerable. The deeper you get into the city, they become vulnerable to anti-tank attacks. That's why they would take up position along their approaches, throw fire downrange because they can fire long range, throw fire downrange while the guys maneuver, and which would provide cover for those guys who maneuvering in front of the tanks. And then when those guys get in front of the tanks and go into the micro environment, the micro combat space, they will be able to fight street by street to be able to take care of. The tanks will come and suppress sniper positions and stuff like that. But on the micro level, the infantry themselves will be going there again, infantry screen, to provide protection for the tanks. So the tanks serve protection for the guys on the macro level, MSC macro level, whereas the guys provide protection for the tanks when they go into the local battle space on the micro, MIC, micro level. So that's what happened. All right, now let's move to the tail of the tape. The tail of the telegram, and we'll talk about stuff in Gemini, NATO KRF, and Kharkov and Kraken. Thank you. As I mentioned before, right before I got on, there was report that Lysichansk was fully liberated. I don't know how true it was, but this could be evidence. This is Chechen forces in Lysichansk at the city administration building. Oh, they weren't playing. They destroyed that building. This is a video of the Ukrainian General Staff about the Russians bombing Snake Island. So Snake Island, the Russians pulled off Snake Island because the Ukrainians kept attacking Snake Island, and really it is not a strategic position. It's not an operational position. I don't even know if I consider it really a tactical position. It's a small little island in the middle of the somewhere in the Black Sea, and it doesn't offer no strategic advantage. The Russians had taken it at the beginning of the war. Remember when there was this report that the Ukrainians told the Russian warship to F off when they were told to surrender, which turned out to be a lie. The three of them were surrendered, and which was smart, and the Russians returned them back to Ukraine. So the Russians pulled out because the Ukrainians, for propaganda value, kept attacking the island, and the Russians had to spend a lot of resources there on something that didn't make sense. So the Russians pulled out. The Ukrainians haven't taken the island. The Russians pulled out, and if the Ukrainians go there, if the Russians don't show restraint and decide to bomb them, they will cause a lot of damage to the Ukrainians too. But so that's what the situation that Snake Island is about. The Ukrainians made a lot of propaganda value about this, but other than the propaganda value, there's no military value here. There's not much they can do with this. In NATO's new strategic concept, which they announced, so NATO's 2022 strategic concept, they announced that Russia is their #1 rival, and then obviously China as well. But they claim that now they will increase their quick reaction force, which is around 40,000 men now. They will increase it to 300,000. That quick reaction force. I mean, it's just something stupid. So that's a huge amount of men that you're going to put down to be ready in what, 24 to 48 hours, to be able to deploy, to be combat ready, and to deploy to go and fight a force that is not really trying to fight you. Russia's not trying to fight, they're trying to defend themselves. And to be frank, NATO can't fight Russia. So this is just nonsense. This is, you can bring all those forces and put them in place. You will not attack Russia. And since Russia wasn't planning to attack them anyways, so this would be forces sitting dead end. Now, I will agree with the Moon of Alabama. He said, this is just hot talk because they're just going to designate few forces in different countries as quick reaction forces, but nothing substantive is going to be done to put them in combat readiness for that length of time and with that huge amount of forces, because the NATO forces are actually in different countries. That means those countries have to support that budget for 300,000 forces that you just and got geared up, combat ready to go and fight. That's money. That's a lot of money. You can't even get NATO to agree to NATO members to agree to 2% of the GDP for NATO, let alone taking most of their forces and making them combat ready just to sit there because one, they're not stupid to try to attack Russia. I'll tell you, NATO and the US have seen what's happened in Ukraine and they're shook. I will actually do an article on this. They've seen what's happened in Ukraine and they are shook. I'll tell you that. So they're not going to do much. I agree with the Moon of Alabama when he said there's just going to designate forces and nothing much going to come out of it because it will be stupid. You got 300,000 troops in readiness just sitting there, combat ready. That means training. They have to train to prepare for industrial type of warfare, something that they're not ready for. Russia is ready. They're not ready for it. Now, I wanted to go back a little bit and talk a little about Kharkov and the Kraken battalion, the Kraken Nazi battalions. So they're in the city of Kharkov. So there's in this area. So let's pull in a little bit. So let's remember first, the Russians, when the war began, they came and they were all in these areas in Kharkov. So this is the Kharkov region that they're still in, but they were almost near the city. They had come all the way down here, all along here, and they were closer to Kharkov city. Then they pulled back. They pulled back some, and then when they pulled back, the Ukrainians went on their photo shoot. Remember, for me, when I say photo shoot, it's what the Ukrainians call counteroffensive because it's really not that. They went on their photo shoot to get to the border here, took a picture, and came back, and about I think 4 men and got killed in that photo shoot operations, which is stupid. Anyway, the Russians here in this area, until they get ready to actually take Kharkov fully, they are using this as a fixing operation. So they won't keep Ukrainian forces here occupied instead of them being released to go somewhere else. Now, when the Russians were close here, they couldn't, considering that they didn't want to actually go and take the city. They were not ready yet to take the city. It was problematic for them to stay close to the city or place because those Nazi battalions that were there, the Kraken, were hiding among civilian areas. So it's hard for the Russians to hit them, because when you hit them, you're hitting the civilian buildings, and the Russians didn't want to destroy it. So the Russians pull back. They pull back, and I don't know if they deliberately pulled back to so that the Kraken. It could be that they pull back deliberately so that the Kraken will come out to them and then they will decimate them. But I think it's more likely that they pull back, because to get into a better, a more defensible position. Because now when there's open land here, not cities, and Ukrainians try to attack here, then you can decimate them with artillery and stuff like that. You see them in front. So I think that's why the Russians pull back. There was even a battle here in Slatina where there were only 9 Russian forces there, and 300 Kraken tried to encircle those forces. And those guys, for 24 hours without help, until help could arrive, it was 24 hours. They whooped the crap out of the Kraken. And so what happened is they whooped the crap out of the Krakens. They got help. They pulled back. They have pulled back even further. And that's when CNN were talking about all this Ukrainian counteroffensive that's succeeding. But no, it was the Russians pulling back and keeping the Ukrainians occupied. But the stupid Kraken, not understanding military stuff, decided to go into to go and play into the Russian hands, and they went there and they got decimated. So now they pull back to the cities, so that the Russians now have started retaking land. So this is indicative of the fact that the Russians does intend to take Kharkov, as I've told you before. The Russians going to take these areas. It's not just going to be the Donbass, right? It's not just going to be the Donbass that Russia will take. Russia will take. They would take Zaporozhye. They would take the places that I'm very sure that they're going to take. They're going to take Kharkov. Obviously, they would take the Donbass, and they would take Zaporozhye. They would take Nikolaev. They would take Odessa. The only thing now I'm not sure yet is whether they would take Dnipropetrovsk. I think they have to take Dnipropetrovsk to protect the Donbass, and they might take Kryvyi Rog, this area, and then leave the rest of Ukraine to themselves. This was already set forth by President Putin when he made the remark that since they want to decommunize, he will help them decommunize properly. That means taking all the historical Russian lands that were only given to Ukraine because they were part of the Soviet Union. So it's those lands that they would take. The Ukrainians went and even changed the name of Dnipropetrovsk to Dnipro, and it's called Kryvyi Rad or something like that. Kryvyi Rad or something. That's what they call that. So that's what's going to happen. Now, one other thing I wanted to point out, because some analysts, even pro-Russian analysts, and even Russian analysts in Russia don't understand why the Russians are not mobilizing their full force and only using expeditionary force here. Yes, the thing, you got to look at it from the big picture, the strategy, the big picture. The U.S. wants to bankrupt Russia. It wants to weaken Russia, not just militarily, but economically and eventually politically. So to do that, you're taking not just on the military side, you're thinking about and weakening them economically. To go and organize a full mobilization, create a whole lot of men that have to be supported. And what other things and economic impact that comes with full mobilization for the U.S. to then continue to support people on the West to continue attacking? That will be, even if the Russians are winning militarily, that would still be weakening the Russians from an economic standpoint. So the Russians look at it and say, no, all we do is that we use minimal force, or force just as enough as our regularly scheduled training operations that we have year to year. And what we'll do is that we rotate all our military districts in there so that they can do live training, because we can take the at the level now that we have reduced combat losses to is sustainable. So we can rotate in different military districts in there. They got 3 operational combat groups. There's the Z, there's the O, and there's the V. So ZOV, ZOV. So the Russians are rotating in those 3 operational groups, different military districts. They all come in training and getting they're getting up to date on modern tactics and stuff like that. And the Russians would continue to keep that as and keep them in keep things that way, because frankly the Russians have set the battlefield such that they don't have to do anything else. The Ukrainians can do nothing. They can't launch an operation, a counter-offensive operation above battalion level. So why deal with them? And another thing, there's a comment that, oh, the Ukrainians fly sorties, 30 sorties or so a day. Well, where mostly are they flying those sorties? When they keep it on the west, on this side, the Russians don't bother them. For the most part, they don't bother them. When they bring it on this side, that's when they get shot down. When they come anywhere near here, that's when they get shot down. So this is a deliberate effort. The Russians want to focus their activities on this side. And so they have prepared the forces for it. They have prepared the battlefield for it by using maneuver warfare to set Kiev forces, keep Kiev forces at bay in other areas until they can take this place. Now, defeating detail, they will go step by step, taking the areas that they want, and Ukraine can't do squat about it. All the weapons the U.S. will send and the NATO will send can't do squat about it. And the U.S. and NATO, they are not stupid enough to try to come and get involved into this battle. So that's why the Russians are doing things the way they are doing it. All right. This has been another episode of the Upriver Crawfish. Thank you for supporting the channel. I hope you guys will support more and share and subscribe. I see I'm getting closer to the 100 subscribers. Hey, you guys try to get more guys to help push this up so I can get to that 1,000 subscriber or more mark and be able to produce more contents for you guys. Again, please comment, like, share, and again, subscribe. All right. And by the way, I did some checking, and Strona, codename Strona, that commander, he's perfectly fine. A Marine commander from one of the videos that I highlighted before. He is perfectly fine. Again, thank you.